my name is Kristin and this is Kristin Kraves Books. I'm finally ready to do my May wrap up. It was my birthday, then I had a wedding out of town, and here I am. I'm looking at the stack of books that I read in May, and I'm realizing that I only have one 5-star, but it's such a good 5-star read and some great ones. I finished a couple of duologies in May. I fell into the romantasy trap that everybody seems to be under right now, and I had a lot of fun with that. I'm learning about my taste in fantasy romance a little bit. So let's just go through this. I have a couple of disappointments, but nothing major. So yeah, lots to talk about. And some of these, it feels like I read them ages ago, so we'll see how much I remember, but let's do this. So we're gonna start the video off with my 2 DNFs. And these are, one is very disappointing, one I should never have picked up in the first place. So the one I should never have tried is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. I didn't like No Exit. I'm in a popular opinion when it comes to that. It wasn't for me. I have since learned that I don't like that kind of thriller where it's a cat and mouse chase and you know who the killer is and you're just following the main character try and survive. Just gets tedious for me. Not my thing. Too chaotic. Not for me. And that is what The Last Word is. But I got suckered in by the premise. The idea of a author stalking a reviewer who gave them 1 star was so intriguing to me. I had to try it. It was on Scribd, so I didn't spend any money, but I knew pretty early on it wasn't gonna work. I thought that a lot of it was stereotypical caricatures. The villain is such a stereotype to me that it was kind of off-putting. The main character also falls into that. She's like, something happened in her marriage or in a past life and she's now like unreliable and living alone and isolated. I just found it so cliche. And that is just a me thing. People are loving this. Everybody seems to be giving it 5 stars. I just shouldn't have picked it up in the first place because I should have known. It's not my type of book and that is on me. So that is all. Please try that. If you love No Exit, I think you're gonna love The Last Word because people seem to be loving it who loved that one. It's just not a me thing. So whatever, that was my fault. The next one is Blood Mercy, which I was buddy reading with Hannah Blackwell and Daphne from Being Daphne. And I still wanted to love this, even though it was almost 800 pages, because it's a vampire story and I love vampire romances. I understand some formal writing when it comes to vampires, like A Diary of Blood is one of my favorite books of the year so far. I loved it. The tone of that, the writing of that worked for vampires. This just didn't flow. It didn't make sense for me. I had to reread sentences over and over again. It was way too formal. And maybe when the audiobook comes out, I think it comes out on the 13th or something of June, I'll try again. And maybe I'll be more immersed listening to it and reading it at the same time, but I struggled. I thought the characters could be really interesting. Our love interest is a cinnamon roll, and I love a cinnamon roll love interest. And the fact that he's a vampire is kind of a twist. I think that could be really good. But honestly, writing, I don't notice it that much, but if I do notice it, it's distracting. And again, it was just too formal in a way that didn't feel natural for me. And that's all I'll say about that one. Again, a lot of people love that. That series is a commitment and I was just not ready to commit at that moment. So those are the 2 books I DNF'd this month. I'm gonna try and talk about my DNFs more, so there you go. And I'm gonna talk about these in order from my least favorite, working up to that 1 5-star. And this first one might be my most disappointing book of the year, not because I think it's a terrible book, but I thought it was going to be an all-time new favorite. It's from an author who I've loved in the past, and that is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. You know by now that A Part of Your World is my favorite romance of all time. If you ask me, I will tell you that's the answer. And this is a sequel to that, more of a companion novel, as romance tends to do. But this had just had tropes in it that don't work for me. I have told you before that I don't love books in hospital settings, and that's this. And I think what worked for Part of Your World was just the small town and the community in there, and I just love the romance. I think the romance in here is great. They do have good chemistry. The romantic lead, Jacob, he is so fantastic. I think some of the best anxiety rep that I've ever read from happens in this book, in his perspective. And I loved the way that, is it Brianna or Brianna? I always forget, it's Brianna. Really embraces his anxiety and is always very aware of it and is always looking to make situations more comfortable for him and knows what he needs in order for that to happen. So I loved that. But if you do not like the miscommunication trope, which normally I can handle some of that because I know that that happens in real life, you're not gonna like this because it's a lot of that. And My major problem with this is the spoiler. It's the third act conflict. I can't tell you what it is, but I know it's so sensitive for a lot of people, so it really puts me in a tricky spot. And it's hard to tell the people who probably need to know about this content warning about it without spoiling the third act conflict. So that is tricky. So if you want to know more about that, you can message me, or I will link the Storygraph content warnings down below. But yeah, something that Abby Jimenez does is she takes these kind of contemporary romances and makes them more serious, and I always think she does a pretty good job of that. We don't talk about the friend zone, we pretend that book doesn't happen. But the other books that I've read from her, I thought she did a great job, and I'm not denying that she did a good job in this. I just think it was too much for me. I think there was too much sadness in this and not enough of the romance, and it falls into the trope. I love fake dating. It's one of my favorite romance tropes, but I feel like there's such a fine line where in something like the fiance farce, I thought that the fake dating wasn't used enough. And in this one, maybe it's used too much in that they just don't communicate. Like, it's so obvious you're into each other, just talk about it. It happens too late, and in the fiance farce, it happened too soon. Like, apparently I'm picky about that. So I don't know, just wasn't my absolute favorite. I gave it a 2.5 stars. I think that the cameos from the characters from the first book were my favorite part, and some moments surrounding that. And yeah, it's just the last 10% of this really weren't for me at all, and it's a hard book for me to recommend, though a lot of people are loving this. So don't just take my word on it, read some reviews. But yeah, still read A Part of Your World. That is my favorite. And yes, I am wearing a Sandlot t-shirt. Don't ask questions, that is my favorite movie of all time. I have a lot of Sandlot t-shirts, but just like everybody else, in May I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I gave it 3.5 stars. This is one you have to go into suspending your disbelief. I struggled with that at first, questioning a lot of the world choices and stuff, and then when I just let that all go, I had such a good time with it. It was fun, it's accessible, it's one of those ones that'll keep you up all night reading if you go into it with the right mindset. It is fantasy romance. It is like the main character is trying to survive. She's in a pretty serious situation, but she's noticing how hot the love interest is. So it's that kind of thing, and normally that would really bother me, but I don't know, it was just fun in this. And of course I have this beautiful edition. I thought the ending was fantastic. I will be reading the sequel when it comes out. There's some disability rep in here. If you like school settings, this is a good one for that. Some of the best dragons I've read about. I liked the dragon's personality in this. It's just a good time. It's just fun. You can't take it too seriously. Don't read too much into it. Don't think about it too much. Just be along for the journey, and I think that's the best way to go into this one. And I know that's hard when there's so much hype for it. I'm glad that I pre-ordered this and kind of read it when it first came out and the hype was just starting, because it's now everywhere. And I don't know if I would have had as great of a time as I did if I had read it like right in this moment. But yeah, I think you could if you just know not to take it too seriously, just to have fun. And sometimes you need a book like that. I don't know, the romance was the weakest part for me, but that was okay because I thought the world was interesting, the dragons were interesting, loved the school setting, a lot of great characters. And I will say that a lot of books made me emotional this month, and I don't know if that was just May was emotional for me or somehow, or the books I was reading were kind of sad, but there were moments in here where I teared up, which I was not prepared for. But yes, I will definitely be reading the sequel, and I think it's a good one to try if you're looking to get into fantasy romance and you're able to suspend your disbelief. Then I finally finished the Celestial Kingdom duology, I believe that's what it's called, and the second book is Heart of the Sun Horror. This is the sequel to Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and I gave this a 3.75, rounding up to a 4, and I think that if you like the first one, you'll be happy with this one. I know the first one's not for everyone, but I was so surprised by it. This is pitched as adult, but it reads on the YA side, so I think you have to know that going into this. It's really accessible. I love their writing. There's some whimsy to it, and I can't tell you much because it is the sequel. And honestly, the way the first one wrapped up was kind of satisfying for me. I didn't know where this was going, wasn't sure it was needed, but I think it was. I liked it. Bawled my eyes out in certain moments. I don't know, it was so emotional. But the ending of this, the thing with this book, and because there is a love triangle in here, and normally I don't love love triangles, but I liked the way that Su Lin Tan did them because I didn't know who she was going to end up with. I didn't know if she was going to end up with nobody. I wasn't really leaning towards one side more than the other. I could justify reasons for both, which I think is so hard to do. So the thing is, with the ending of this one, I don't think there was a way to make every reader satisfied, because people had different ships. People wanted her with nobody. I don't know. It's a hard one, and I think that the way she ended it was a surprise for me and a twist, and I still think about it. So I think she was successful in that way. I loved everything to do with her mother and the world. Actually, if you're into dragons, there are dragons in this one more than in the first, I believe, and just really political. And I had such a good time with it, and I really like our main character, and she's a little bit like, you know, in part of the love triangle where she kind of leads them both on in a way, but they're both aware. She communicates that to them, that she loves them both and she's struggling and all that stuff. But there's more going on than just the romance. The politics are huge. There's like big stakes in here. And I have heard that Sue Lin Tan is writing more books in this world, not with these characters, I don't believe, but in the world in general, which I am so up for, because she's done a lot of work building up this world, and I think that she should utilize that. So yes, I'm so happy to finally be done with this duology. I recommend it. I had a really good time, and I will look out for anything Sue Lin Tan writes next. The other duology that I finished finally is The Clock Tower Wars by T. Kingfisher. The second book is The Wonder Engine. The first one is Clockwork Boys. And really this reads like one book split into two parts, and I knew that going into it. I should have read the second book right after, but it was during a readathon and I was just worn out on T. Kingfisher. I don't know how that's possible, but I was. And I put it off for months and months, like almost a year. But T. Kingfisher is nice enough, was nice enough to do a little summary of the first book. But you do kind of become detached from the characters in this one, because I didn't remember them as much. And it's really just a continuation of their journey, though I do think I like the second one more, because more happens. Obviously there's more character development, there's more depth to their relationships, because the first one is them all kind of meeting, and then you get this found family stronger in the second one, a bit of a romance in the second one. And the world is interesting, so I'm happy that T. Kingfisher is writing more in this world, because this is the first duology in a larger series. The next book is Sword Heart, which I know is so many people's favorite T. Kingfisher, so I'm so excited to finally get to that. And then we have the Paladin series with Paladin Grace and all of those, all in the same world. So this is very much a quest story, which normally doesn't work for me, but it's T. Kingfisher. She's always my exception. And in the second one, The Wonder Engine, the quest is over, so it's them in the area where they're trying to complete a mission. And I can't give too much away more than that, but it was fun, action-packed, great characters, some really hilarious moments, what you would expect from T. Kingfisher, some more serious ones as well, and it was just joyful for me. I just get so much joy out of all of her work, and I think this duology is underrated. A lot of people start with Sword Heart and then go on to the Paladin series and skip this one altogether. I just don't think people even know it exists. But I do recommend it because I think it sets up a lot. I mean, I haven't continued with the series. I don't know how important it is, but I feel like I understand the world a lot better now and what is at play and things like that. So I did really enjoy this. It wasn't the longer side. I wasn't expecting it to be so long, but I liked the audiobook. So yes, so happy to be finished with that. We will continue on with some fantasy romance. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I have to look at that because I always forget that title. And this is by Krista Broadbent. Of course, everybody seems to be reading this right now. I had such a good time with this. I think if you love Fourth Wing, you have to read this because in my opinion it's better. But I'm a vampire girl. I love vampires. We're following Aurea, who is a human whose entire family is killed when she's a child, and this vampire kind of saves her and brings him into the vampire world, and she's always on edge. She's always being threatened. Obviously she's human, and she has to enter this contest where she can get one wish from a goddess, and you know what her wish is probably going to be, but it's a fight to the death. Only one survivor in the end. So if you like the Hunger Games, it's that kind of vibe, except this is voluntary. And yeah, you get all the competitions. It's a good time. It is a slow burn romance, which I always appreciate. I love the love interest Rain. There are some really endearing moments between them. You don't get steam for a long time, which I appreciated. You really see them go from like enemies to lovers and start to understand each other. The ending is absolutely shocking. I want to read the sequel very badly, but I kind of want the audiobooks. But then I looked and the audiobooks are being redone and the second one doesn't come out till October, so I don't think I can wait. I'm gonna have to get that from Kindle Unlimited and maybe read it on the beach this summer because it's such an explosive ending and the world is just so interesting, and I love me some vampires. I love to see this relationship and where it is going. And then I read the novella that comes after this, but it follows different characters. these two characters, I believe, are important to the second book. So I recommend reading it. It is called Six Gorge Roses, and I had such a good time. It's less of a slow burn because it is a novella, but I do feel like you felt the buildup in this one. And again, it's a relationship between a human and a vampire, and our human character is living in a world where there is like a plague going around. Her sister is dying, and she is a scientist, and she's determined to find the cure, and she thinks maybe vampire blood is the ticket to that. So she goes to the house of this vampire that lives close to her, and nobody ever goes on his doorstep, and immediately they have a connection. They have great banter. It gets steamy, and I just loved it. They write letters to one another, which I really loved, and apparently they're in the second book, and I'm so excited to see them again because I really loved that novella. And I think you could even read it as a standalone because it doesn't really spoil anything for the first book at all. So if you just want to get a taste of it, try that one. I loved it. I'm here for vampire stories all day long. I then read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human by Kimberly Lemming. This is the third book in the Mead and Mishaps series. The audiobook's not out yet, and it's not on KU, so I had to get the ebook, but it was great. And I shouldn't love it because one of my most hated tropes is fated mates. I just don't like fated mates for some reason. I think the reason is I like to see these people choose one another, not feel like they are destined to be with each other. But the way Kimberly Lemming does it, it's just fun. It's kind of questionable at times just because I think that fated mates is, and I don't agree with all of the choices of her characters, but it's such a good time. It's steamy right off the bat. Okay, it's steamy, it's ridiculous, it's fun. I recommend the series. This one's probably my least favorite in the series, but again, I listened to the other book too, so I wonder if like the narration of it makes it more fun for me. But yeah, it's still great. There's a dragon in it. The male love interest is a dragon, which is pretty awesome. And there is a connection to the female main character and how she is connected to the other characters from the first two books. And I think my only other gripe with this was that it wasn't set in the same town as the first two books were. Well, the first one not as much, but the second one is my favorite, and it was in a small town, and that's just something that I like. So we spent so much time away from that and from the characters that we came to love in the first two books that it was a little bit sad for me. I miss them, but I'm excited for more in this series. These were actually self-published books that Orbit has picked up. It feels like an odd choice for Orbit, but I'm here for it. And yeah, so I really, really like this, and I will be purchasing these when they do become traditionally published. And I'm glad they didn't change the covers too much, just the fonts, but yeah. If you like the first two, I think you're gonna like this one. It's fun, it's ridiculous, everything you expect. I then reread The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. I won this in a giveaway from Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, so thank you to her. And the first time I read this, I listened to the audiobook, and I feel like I missed so much, and I did. I liked it more the second time. It is short. You can get through this so quickly. There are more in this series that I'm gonna have to read. It is just, there's something about the setup of somebody who's older telling other people a story from their youth that works for me. I just love that setup. And she's just talking about the time when she was a handmaiden to a princess and what happened to that princess. And that's all you need to know because it is so short, but it's so beautifully done. I think Nevo is one of those authors whose writing you're gonna connect with or you won't, and I connect with it. I love everything I've read by Nevo, but she definitely has a unique writing style, and if you want to try her writing, this is the way to go because this series is so short. All the books in the series are so short, and I think the fourth or fifth one comes out this year, so I need to continue on with it. I'm so happy to have a copy and to have reread it physically because I just knew after the audiobook that I missed a lot, and I was correct. So I just realized that I lied. I have 2 5-star reads this month. The last book I read in May was 5 stars. I don't know how I forgot that, but the one 4.5 star read I have is Blood of the Chosen by Django Wexler. This is the sequel to Ashes of the Sun. This is the, I always forget the series name, Burning Blade and Silver Eye series. There are only 3 books. The last book is out, but doesn't have an audiobook, and the audiobook comes out in August. This seems to be my plight of May, where I read books that are gonna get audiobooks. They just aren't out yet, but anyways, the ending of this one makes me want to just read the third one right away without the audiobook because this was so good. And the series is often referred to as gay Star Wars, and that is pretty accurate, except I would say this leans more fantasy with sci-fi elements. And it's just a setup of brother and sister are separated when they were young and they end up on different sides. So Maya is taken away from her family when she is a child, and she works for like the government of this world, and her brother has been upset about this ever since. It destroyed his family, and so he's now a rebel. And they both have their own perspectives, and I think that the characters within their perspectives are strong, and I am attached to them. There's a character called Kit in Guyer's perspective who isn't my favorite, but she grew on me a little bit in this one, I think because he now has more characters, so it's not so much of her. And some interesting love interests in that storyline. But Maya is in a sapphic relationship with a woman named Beck, who I love. She's quirky. I love their romance. It evolves a little bit further in this one. It is definitely slow burn and just kind of sweet. And I love all the side characters that Maya has. I would say, though she has some darker themes because she is the one questioning whether what she's doing is right, she has lighter characters and sweeter characters with her, and then Guyers are more sinister and it's a little bit darker, and just like as you might expect with rebels. So yeah, that dichotomy is interesting. Everything about this was really good. The ending was epic. I answered a lot of questions, but I still have a lot of questions. My only thing is that I think it follows a lot of the same plot beats of the first one, that the storyline, though we're learning different information and different things happening, it just seems like step by step was pretty similar to the first book. But I can't wait to read the final book in this. This is going to be one of my favorite series ever. I just love it. And now moving on to my 5 stars. I don't think I could pick a favorite between these two. They're very different. But I will talk about the one that I read first, and that is As Long as the Lemon Tree Grows by Zulfa Kuto. And I already read this with Beck from Beck's Reads. And yeah, this was a heartbreaker. I told you that a lot of books made me cry this month. This one did that the most. I was a mess. I don't know why I had it in my head that this was historical fiction. I think that just comes from my ignorance of not knowing when the Syrian Revolution was happening. This takes place in 2011, and there is an author note at the back. So if you are more familiar with the Syrian Revolution and everything that was happening at this time in 2011, some of the events that unfolded that are true events, she just altered the timeline a bit for the sake of the story. So just know that going in if you are more familiar. But we're just following a character who has lost her entire family except for her pregnant sister-in-law. Her mom was killed, and her father and brother were arrested, and they are now prisoners of war. So it's just her and her sister-in-law, and she was going to school to be a pharmacist, but is now a doctor because there are no doctors around. She works in a hospital, and she's really torn with a promise she made to her brother to save his wife and his baby and protect them and leave Syria, and the devotion she feels to Syria and its people and how much they need her as a doctor, and she fights with that a lot. There's also a romance in here, and it's just everything about this was just heartbreaking. There's a moment in here where I was just a mess, and a lot of conversations about the ignorance of everybody else around the world, and I felt that, and it's true, and I really felt called out, and I should have been called out. It's something that had me Googling and watching videos on YouTube. A heartbreaking book, but some hope in this as well. Some really great quotes, I thought. One I will reread. Fairy Loot is putting up a gorgeous edition. Not everybody fight for it. I need to get a copy, but it is such a gorgeous edition of this book. I didn't think this could get any prettier, but yeah, loved it. It's YA, but obviously it reads older because our character, she's 18 and she's going through some heavy stuff, so it's a lot, but I think everybody should try it even if it's not your typical genre. And then last but not least, we have this big chunker. I tabbed this one. This is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I've never read anything by Mark Lawrence before. I am not the biggest grimdark reader. Epic fantasy I'm very picky about. So this is the first one where I felt like this would be for me, and I was right. If you like Piranesi by Suzanne Clark, you need to read this. It gave me that vibe, and I'm always searching for that vibe. And in this one, there's like a library that's a labyrinth, and it's so cool and well done. And we're following it's so hard to talk about this one because it'll be all spoilers. I knew nothing. You have to go into it just accepting it for what it is, and really it follows a boy and a girl. The girl is, her whole family is killed, and she is scooped up by someone and trained to work in a library. That is all I'll say. And she has a lot of discoveries. And then there's a boy, who happens to be trapped in the library. And maybe their fates intertwine. I don't know. I don't want to tell you more. The writing's beautiful. It's very, very Pure Nessie vibes. A labyrinth. It's so cool. The ending left on a bit of a cliffhanger, but not too bad, and I cannot wait for the next book in the series. I think it's already been written, and I think that Mark Lawrence has already written the 3rd book, so that is fantastic because I need more. I just love the vibes of this one so much. It was so good, and it was a perfect way to end May. So there we go. My June reading hasn't been happening, and that's terrible because I am the host of a readathon, but I'm gonna get back into it today. It's just been a busy month already. And let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought about them, if any are on your TBR, or what the best book you read in May was. I would love to hear about it. Thank you again for your support. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.